right, so this is our first ever Charging Your Tesla webinar educational experience. And like I said, this is a tag team event with John. So there's two main camps in our charging routines. Most EV owners can charge at home or able to at work, just like plugging a smartphone or your laptop. You're just going to wake up to a full charge every single day. It's easy, it's done, and there's not too much to think about. Some EV owners are going to have potential charging constraints. You might not be able to plug in at home or at work, and you might rely a little bit more on some of the public charging stations or superchargers. And we're going to address both the some and the most categories today. So a little bonus for everyone, long distance travel, charging is mostly always going to occur, almost always going to occur at superchargers. And we'll talk about these two and some tips when we get to that point. All right, so John, you want to go ahead and take it away with lingo?
Sure. Our lingo starts with power. It's the instantaneous juice that we measure in kilowatts. And that is opposed to energy, which is power over time. So that we use that for storage or delivery of the juice. And we measure that in kilowatt hours. So it's very easy to get the two confused, but think about power as the strength and energy as the quantity of it over time. So it's kilowatts and kilowatt hours. Next, efficiency. That would be similar to your miles per gallon. It's the consumption in watt hours per mile. So an average of about 250 or less is really good. And that would mean you're getting 250 times 4, which would be, 1 kilowatt. You'd be getting, decent range per kilowatt hour that you get billed for. So next is the state of charge. That's simply how full the battery is. It's in percent or in miles. Some people prefer percentage, and a few people still hold out and they use miles. But state of charge is what we call it. And finally, it's not a common term, but grazing means when you're grabbing extra juice in public, especially in the winter, for folks who live in condos or apartments, especially, they might want to graze and get a little extra charge where it's available. So those are basically the only terms that we'll be using throughout this, and it's good to know the difference between power, energy, and efficiency.
And as John was saying too, some Tesla owners in the beginning, you're able to choose between how you want your energy to display. Do you want it to show in mileage or percentage or battery percentage or state of charge, right? For the first maybe few months, the first year, you might really want to focus more on keeping it on miles. But once you know your car, once you really get a good understanding of its efficiency overall, you might want to switch that to percentage. And it's just a little bit easier because percentage is always going to be the percentage of the battery where mileage may fluctuate. So onto some general advice. Just charge, whether you're at work or at home, just always charge. And we'll talk about kind of like the ABCs of that as well. So just charge at home or at work and drive. It's very simple. It literally is just like plugging in your phone or your laptop. Unless you're in the camp that you can't, then you need to spend a little bit more time getting familiar with the on-the-go options. And like we said, we're going to talk about those as well. And all owners should always be aware of the wide range of charging solutions out there. And we're going to talk about not every single option, but just about every single option that's available. So you do have choices. And we're going to break these down. So there are 3 flavors of EVSE. And John, what is EVSE?
That's the technical name, but you'll see it in print. It just means electric vehicle supply equipment, namely charging station. So if it's a charging station, they may abbreviate it to EVSE.
John, would you like to take level 1?
You got it. Level 1 is alternating current. It's AC. It's mainly at home, but sometimes in public. Not very often, but it's basically good for an all-day trickle charge. It's 120 volts AC, like Steven said, just like you would plug in your phone or your laptop. And typically at home, it's 15 amp service. You've seen that before. Commercially, usually 20 amps. And you can get different adapters from Tesla to take advantage of that. If you do need a little extra juice while you're charging on that trickle charge, you can get a 20 amp service for your car. It's the slowest average charge, however. It's only about 3 to 5 miles per hour. So if you are plugged in for 10 hours overnight, you can possibly get 50 miles of range, which may be sufficient. And I think Stephen's going to chime in on that. But right now, I'd like to say that winter will tend to reduce that, sometimes all the way to 0 miles per hour when the battery is so-called cold soaked. It's essentially too cold to charge. And this can be a concern when level 2, or level 1 rather, is your only option. So if you're in an exceedingly cold climate and maybe you park outside in the winter, you may want to bypass level 1 and upgrade. Now, just a little technicality here, the charger for level 1 is built into the car. So all AC, alternating current charging, takes place within the car with the charger in the car. And finally, be prepared to waste a little more time. Obviously, 10 hours is a while, and a little bit more money. Level 1 charging is not the most efficient for your pocketbook. It may be a few percent more expensive.
So as John was alluding to, for the last little over 3 years now with my Model 3, I've been, I don't want to say constricted because I've used many different types of charging, but at home, I've literally been using just a standard wall outlet, what you plug your phone into, your blender, everything, except not in the house, I plug it in the garage. But that is what I've been using for the last 3 years. So even if you're in the boat where you say, I'm really stretching my budget with this car, this is taking up just about everything I have, you don't have to worry about spending $500, $1,000, $1,500 on whatever charging level you want to go with. If you want to get a Tesla destination charger and all the lines, we'll talk about that too. But you can get by. It's going to depend on your driving habits, as far as, do you have a 30-minute, an hour commute to work? Maybe it's 2 hours, an hour there, an hour coming back. Well, like I said, we'll go into that. If you work from home, probably you can get by with literally just a level 1.
Great. I'll take this one, Stephen. Here's an example. It's really your main level 1 choice out there for Tesla. It's the well-known Tesla mobile connector. Notice they don't say it's a charger, because remember, the charger is built into the car. So it's the mobile connector that you use when you're on the road most of the time. And notice what's in my hand. It's a little bit of a plug. And I don't know if anyone can see if my camera is also visible, but I have one right here. This is the size of it for comparison. It's just a little Tesla smile face sort of design on the socket. And you're all familiar with it. That's the one that you use to plug into the car. So it's a 515 plug, as the tech people would call it. You can see that. It's the 2 prongs with a grounding plug on it. That plugs into your regular wall socket. So it's ordinary 120 volts, 15 amps, like Stephen mentioned, for your blender or whatever appliance. It's no longer included with new vehicles. Most of you may have received the Tesla mobile connector for free with the car, but they've done some analytics and they realized that not everyone uses it. Remember, level 1 is not always used, especially when people have a home connector that we'll talk about later. So it's $275 when it's in stock. The cost to use, that's basically your household electricity rate. Unless you have solar, which it will defray the cost, probably down to nothing. And sometimes you can plug in for free in public. Some municipalities may have 120 outlets. The plug, as I mentioned, is a Tesla plug, and you just plug it in. That's all you need to do is activate it by plugging it in. So this is your most common mobile solution. If you go on trips, this is something that you can use to plug in at your bed and breakfast potentially. You could use it at home if you prefer, but we will be showing a better option for that soon.
And John and I were just talking about, speaking specifically on the mobile connector, how it's not, doesn't come standard with Teslas anymore. If you're looking to, if you're in today's webinar and you don't have a Tesla, this is why maybe you're just looking to see, like, what is this all about? How complicated is this? Which it's not complicated. That's what we're trying to also help out with. But is that if you're getting a used Tesla, there's a very good chance that it does come with a mobile connector. So that is another plus of potentially getting a used Tesla. Right, so on to level 2, which is also AC. So level 2 is the best option for home. It's more efficient than level 1, and often you can find it in public. This is the typical, and we say as far as public, you can find a wall outlet anywhere, but this is really referring more to charging. This is 240 volt AC. Typically it's around between 25 and 100 amp for service, and either a dedicated dryer outlet or a custom install. By that we mean if there's different, within that 25 to 100 amps, you're going to have a different outlet. So sometimes it might look like a dryer outlet. Sometimes it's called a NEMA 1450. That's the type of outlet. So most of the time, though, this is going to require an electrician to get done. It's a fairly unique outlet. It's not quite as.
You know what? An electric range. You said there's a range of options. Well, an electric range is the 1450. It's got 4 prongs on it. Just throw that in.
So it's not quite as slow of an average charge. Usually it's about between 20 and 30 miles per hour. And what we mean by that, just in case it doesn't, it was like speed, 20 to 30 miles an hour. So for every hour that your vehicle's plugged in, you're looking at gaining between 20 and 30 miles an hour. Like before we were talking about with level 1, you're looking at about 3 to 5 miles an hour, but that will change in the wintertime if your battery is cold soaked. The charger, once again, it's built into the car, so you're not looking to get some massive equipment. Everything is done in the car for that. And then a tip is to use the in-car voice command. You can see navigate to a charge point. And that is a brand, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, to get a list of charge points, charging stations right on your screen. And these are some examples of level 2. So just as John showed the picture before with the level 1, and I'll quickly go back just so you can see the difference. If you could see my mouse, this is what we're really going to focus on right now, is the adapter piece. So that was the 515. And now you're looking at the NEMA 1450. So it's still the same mobile connector. This, I was about to say, this comes with your car. So it probably came with your car. If you're here today, it probably came with your car. But now if you're buying a new Tesla today, you can, as an option, you can buy the mobile connector for $275. And then this piece over here, this adapter, which will plug into there over here, is just kind of, it's like a dongle is the best way you could think of it, because you can switch out the 515 with the 1450 and vice versa. So this is really great for anyone who does a lot of road tripping. You could even buy a package through Tesla that has, geez, I want to say maybe like 7 to 10 different adapters. So if you do a lot of road tripping, it's a good way to think of it is it's like insurance. Like you probably don't need to have this in your car with you all the time, but it's nice to know that it exists. Cost for use is just like the level 1, which is it's your household utility rate unless you have solar. And occasionally, but more often than not, you'll find that level 2 charging is free. And even a good example is RV parks, or I'll make this plug once again, John, this will be the last time, but we have our club camping trip. And we did a lot of research on this. I don't believe she's on there, but Kim Mannett is the one who took lead on that. And she did a really good job at making sure that we'd have the best location, that all the sites have NEMA 1450 outlet, or I think it's 1450, and there's even another one too. Same thing, just like before, it's a Tesla plug, and you just plug it in just like you would with level 1. All right, and I'll do this one, and John, maybe if you want to take the next slide. So we'll talk about the Tesla wall connector, and maybe even Harry, after the slide's over, if you want to talk a little bit about yours. So the Tesla wall connector, this is the most popular. It's popular either for domestic or for destination charging. So you can see this at a hotel, or you could see it at a club member's house or your own house. Purchase price is $495 plus installation. So it's a little bit more of an expensive option, but this may be something that you find as a good investment as well. Not even just as far as putting value into your house or wherever you may be, but even just time, as far as the time investment goes. Once again, this is going to either be domestic rate for what your utility costs, but I would say 95% of the time, if you find a Tesla destination charger, it is free and it is pretty fast. Plug is it's Tesla plug, just like how you have your mobile connector, and on rare occasions it may be J1772. To activate it, just like the mobile connector, there's this little button right on the top of the plug. Press that and it opens up your charge port. Push it right in. The most preferred fastest home charging setup, that's pretty much your advantage, is this is just the best you can get, especially for the price. And I think John and I were saying before that some people are even looking at about 50 miles an hour for charging. And
yeah, that's true.
It's
That's
about
true. Yeah, if the 80 amp was for the old Model S that had 2 chargers on board, there was an optional second charger in the old days. But these days, they don't do that anymore. They just have a single charger. But if you have high enough current at 48 amps, you could get 50 miles an hour of range for every hour.
And so you might also be wondering, you say, like, if I could just get the mobile connector for $295, get a NEMA 1450, it's probably a bit cheaper, and you're still getting around 28 miles an hour. It's probably what you're looking at with that option. But let's say that you are a real estate agent and you're driving around all day, you're maybe coming back to your house, maybe you work from home, that's your office. This is a great option too, because you're able to, within just an hour, you're getting around probably between about 40 and 50 miles an hour of range added. So just if you're thinking, why would I spend $500 on this? Is it really worth it? It's going to be very dependent on your basically your lifestyle. Harry, if you're still here, if you want to unmute and maybe talk about the wall connector you have and maybe just a little bit of information on that.
Yes, I didn't get the wall connector because I do a lot of traveling. I simply got the wall connector because I just wanted to have something that was mounted permanently there rather than using the mobile charger all the time. So I have, when I did the wiring for the garage for the mobile connector for the Tesla back in 2016, I had him put in two NEMA 1450 outlets, one on each side of the garage in appropriate locations. So I still have the one 1450 outlet, and I actually have my mobile charger plugged into that just in case Stephen comes to visit and he can use the wall connector now. And the wall connector, I simply, I took the 1450 outlet out, wired the wall connector into that where the 1450 box is, and connected that up. It was, other than working with heavy duty wire, it was actually very simple to do. And it works great. And I know I'm plugged in right now because the car was, I've been running errands all day. So right now it's charging at the rate of 43 miles per hour, and that's on a 50 amp circuit. So that kind of gives you an idea. I didn't really do it for any particular reason other than it just convenience of having the wall connector. Stephen, you noticed when you plugged yours in how much faster it was charging.
Right. It honestly feels like owning a different car. Like, it's not supposed to be able to charge that fast in a garage. But it is like, it's something that I would say financially, if you are comfortable doing this, go for it. It's just a big improvement on quality of life, and it makes the ownership experience even that much better.
Just do it. Yeah. And one interesting fact, for a short time, Tesla sold the same wall connector with the 1450 plug on it, so that you could just plug it into your existing socket like Harry originally had. But they yanked it from the store because allegedly it's not up to code to have something like that. And you're better off not always plugging and unplugging a 240 volt plug into the receptacle. You don't want to give it too much extra wear and tear. So the best solution by and large is to get a permanently mounted wall connector. And there are electricians in your area through the Tesla website that are listed. So if you need somebody who knows how to do it, Tesla already has that handled.
Thank you, Harry.
It was actually quite easy to do the installation. Once of course I had the 1450 outlet and cabling there, it was actually quite easy to do the connector. And I even was going to have my own electrician do it because he's experienced with this high level of wiring, the 1450 wiring, and but I ended up doing myself, and it was very simple, straightforward. The connector is the wall connector is very simple to wire up, and it was great. You just need to have some rudimentary knowledge of electricity, and if you don't, then get yourself an electrician.
If you don't, get yourself an electrician. This is Harry has his knowledge, but if you do not, play this on the safe side. And either way, I believe you still need to get it inspected. So it's probably just easiest if you get a professional to have that done. All right, John, would you like to talk about the J1772 adapter?
Sure, I've got one in hand right here. You folks have probably seen this, and we mentioned it before. It's a J1772 adapter. And what you use this for is to plug into non-Tesla level 2 charging stations. Now notice, I specified level 2. These will not work on those giant stations that are popping up with Electrify America and the New York Power Authority Charge New York station. This is only for AC charging, level 2. One's included with the vehicle as far as we still know. If anyone wants to correct us, if they just got their car delivered, we think it's still included, but it's only a $50 accessory. Get a genuine Tesla one if you need a spare. There are fake ones on the market now, which I can't vouch for, but at only $50 from Tesla, I think it's a good investment to have a spare one, just in case you need it on the road and can't charge at home. That's the typical use case. So yeah, you could plug into virtually any brand of level 2 public charging once you have this, because Tesla has its own proprietary plug, and you will not find anything but a Tesla wall connector at a hotel that will work directly. Otherwise, you'll need the adapter. So that's all there is to it. It's such a simple device and so useful.
So the next few slides that we're going to show, we're going to talk about a couple of different options. We showed you the Tesla level 2 charger, but now, or certainly not the charger, but the, I guess, what we call it? I guess we wouldn't call it the charger.
Charging station, yeah.
Charging station, I guess. So now we're going to talk about a few different third-party options that are available. And just so we can tie the two in together, this adapter, you do not need it for the Tesla one. It's the same as it is if you had the mobile connector. But this one adapter works on pretty much, I'd say, all of the level 2 chargers. I don't really think that there's a different level 2 charger that exists out there besides the J1772. So one of the options is the Clipper Creek. This is a brand. Clipper Creek is a brand. Purchase price is about $600 plus installation. And your installation price is going to vary as well. For me, I think I was originally quoted for installing a NEMA 1450, I want to say it was like $500, but most of the infrastructure was there. It's a fairly small house. The garage is very close to the power box. At my parents' house a few years ago, I got a quote while I was there, and they quoted like $1,500 or $1,600 just to get an outlet installed. Just because the box, the length of the cabling. You'll also see that things are a little bit, I mean, everyone sees this now, but things are more expensive too. Copper and a lot of electrical equipment is a little bit more expensive. So if you're considering getting a level 2 charger installed, make sure you do some shopping around for who your electrician is going to be. Cost per use is going to either be domestic rate, right, for your house, for whatever utility charges, or it is generally free in public. This is going to be your J1772 plus the adapter that you're going to need. You cannot use this unless you have the adapter. I guess the major caveat on that is if you're in Europe, where they actually have a different charge port in their cars. But probably no one here is from Europe on this webinar today. And the way to activate it is just plugging in. So I know it sounds a little funny, but if you just got your car, it might be a little intimidating. Like, do I need to plug the adapter in first onto the charger? Do I put the adapter into the car and then plug it in there? It really doesn't make a difference. You'll probably find that it is easier to take the adapter, plug it into the charging cable, and then insert it into the car. It's just a little bit easier that way. So another option, this is the ChargePoint charger. And from what I've seen, this seems to be the most popular third-party charging out there that's available. So the gym that I go to, I'll do a little bit of real life example. My gym has a ChargePoint charger. It looks just like this one over here. It is free, and it is my motivation to go to the gym. You're looking at roughly, I think John and I talked about it before, but it's about, I think I get about 22 or 23 miles per hour. So if you're on the treadmill for an hour, you're doing some weights for a little bit, you're leaving with, you know, a decent amount of range that's added. These can cost about $600 for domestic installation. It's going to look different than this one. It's pretty much just from this section here to the bottom, and only going to have one charging cable. But these can actually go up to about $12,000. And this is really, it's just going to depend on the equipment that's needed. This is more for commercial. This is not something you would get at your house once you're looking at that $12,000 mark. Cost per use is going to vary from either free, and it could go up to about $1 an hour. It's really going to depend on where it's located. The one at my gym, I believe it's actually National Grid who pays the electricity for that. It's pretty cool. It's your J1772 plus you'll need your adapter. And to activate it, you can use your mobile phone. Really cool. I have an iPhone, just recently got it a few months ago. And you use Face ID, you click the power button twice, pulls up there's my credit card. You tap over here, there's my ChargePoint card. Use Face ID, you put it right next to the ChargePoint device and it unlocks and you're good to go. It is so seamless. But if you don't have an iPhone, if you rather not have it be on there, whatever it might be, you can also get an RFID card. They could send that to you and you just tap right on the piece over here. You see same little icon there, same over here, tap it right there and it works the same way that your phone would work. But I would say if you're comfortable with it, use your phone just because it's one less thing that you have to think about, one less thing you have to carry.
Can I just add something to that? That was excellent, Stephen. The RFID card, I believe it's a $5 fee, and then it's similar to EasyPass, where they'll re-up your debit card, from a $10 charge or $15, whatever it is, just if you dip below that amount, and then it's automatically on file. So it's really pretty simple. Not as easy as the whole Tesla thing, but it's pretty close. And it's funny because my Android phone, you just have to have that phone turned on and you touch it. You don't have to do anything else. So it's pretty
okay.
simple.
Android phones.
I told you this would be like a podcast, a little feisty. I'll take the next one, Steve.
John, actually, just before we go on, maybe if we can give some
yeah.
examples. So you took this picture. Where was this this charger located?
This one is in a county park in Erie County, New York, in a place called Lancaster, and it's free to use. It's very popular. People use it. They either hang out in the park or maybe take a bike ride, that sort of thing. And that's a great way of making use of something. If anyone is interested, if they own a business or know of a business that's interested in installing these types of stations, I have a direct connection to National Grid, and I'm more than happy to get you set up with them through what's called what is it called? Make Ready, M-A-K-E Ready, which allows you to bypass all the costs of setting up the infrastructure. So National Grid will pay for the line, they'll install it, they'll put everything in except for the station itself, which you pay for. So they pay for everything up to the station, which can be pretty significant sometimes. So again, if you have any questions, just message me later. But it's a really great system for folks who can't charge at home or at work, or if you just want to get that extra bit of juice if you're going to be somewhere.
The one last thing while we talk about ChargePoint, we do have for our paid members of the club, we also have a discount available. So if you're looking to get a ChargePoint charger installed at your house, the deal is between ChargePoint and Cooper Electric. It's on our paid member benefits page, so you can check that out as an option. Actually, John, why don't you go ahead and talk about this one too? You have a little bit more information on this.
I know people will probably have other questions, but we're going to try to get to all those pretty soon. We're just going to wrap up with this one and a few more slides. The G, is everyone muted?
I'm going to check. Yeah, everyone, if you could just go ahead and make sure that your microphone is on mute. I'll go ahead and give
now,
a
here's
quick
a
check.
relic. This was the first public charging station type that was in my neck of the woods. So it looks a little clunky, but it was generally free to use. That little screen didn't even matter, a little LCD screen that you see in the upper right side. But it just shows how far along we've come in about a decade. So if you see one of these around, of course, it still uses the same adapter. I mean, that's going to be your standard J1772 adapter. But I just put that on there for old time's sake to show how sleek things have been getting, and hopefully we'll get even better. So that's the GE Watt station, totally discontinued. It's a little throwback. Now, here's another one that is used, and this one is a little bit different. This one you do have to plug in before you tap the card or use your app. It's a little bit finicky. But EV Connect is similar to ChargePoint. It's not quite as popular. And of course, the price will vary depending on which one you buy. The beauty of it, though, is this shows up in places like municipal parking ramps or other locations on the throughway even. EV Connect is just like ChargePoint, where you have to subscribe. You get your little RFID card. But sometimes you may be able to use any RFID card, like if your car manufacturer, Mercedes, has its own charging card, that may activate it as well. So we just want to provide you with these options in the event that you're ever somewhere where you really need a charge. You have options between the mobile app and the RFID card. And that's all there is to it. So it's very similar to ChargePoint.
John, does BTC power stand for Bitcoin power?
No, I think this was before Bitcoin.
Okay. All right, so I'll
All
go ahead
right.
and talk about DC charging. This is when we think of supercharging, this is DC charging, and it's also, you see it as Dcfc, direct current. Wait, what is it? DC, is it DC, right?
Yeah, direct current fast charging.
DCFC.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's not called level 3. That's a
Right.
common mistake. There's no such thing as level 3. It would have been level 3 for the AC thing, but they never passed it. So it's not a standard. It's just called Dcfc.
So we'll talk about DC fast charging now, which is virtual, like unless you have some crazy financial means to get this done, you're not going to get a DC fast charger at your house. I don't even know if Elon has one. It is, well, down in, I guess it would be in Boca Chica now. But this is not something you get at a house. This is, we'll talk about where you see these, but this is going to be for commercial or municipal. As New York Staters, now when you're on the throughway, you'll actually see that they have direct DC charging stations on the highways. Now, not at all of those service plazas, but you'll see that at a decent amount of them, they're putting those in, which is really great to see. As Tesla owners, just before going to the next part, as Tesla owners, we really don't need to rely on the third-party DC chargers that exist, because Tesla has their own DC charging, and that is the Supercharger. And we'll go a little bit more about kind of how great Tesla made that for owners, that experience. But this is up to about 500 volts of direct current. The fastest average charge, you're looking at about up to 1,000 miles per hour. So let's just take a little trip down memory lane here. A standard wall outlet, you're looking at about 3 to 5 miles an hour. With the fastest supercharger, you can get up to, for a short amount of time, you can get up to 1,000 miles an hour. The home charging, right, we said it's about 40 miles an hour. Some Publix level 2 chargers are about 20, 22, somewhere around there. With a direct current station like a supercharger, you can get up to 1,000 miles an hour. So this is if the battery's in a sweet spot, and it's going to be up to 50%. Don't worry too much about the what's in the parentheses as far as I guess the specifics of it, but just know that there are some specifics that do belong to it, if that makes sense. So you can get up to 1,000 miles an hour, but it's not for the whole time you're charging. So it's going to taper down. The last 20%, and I kind of want to elaborate a little bit on this, the last 20% can take as long as the first 80. There's nothing wrong with the car, nothing's happening with their batteries. This is actually to prevent any damage to ever being done to the batteries. So they're able to take a good amount of power coming in the initial, 1% to 50%, and then up to about that 80%. But anything from 80 to 100, you're going to see a slowdown even at a version 3 supercharger. And we'll talk about that in a little bit too. And John was explaining, he said it's almost like filling up a wine glass or a beer glass. You could pour pretty fast when you're taking a beer bottle and you're pouring it into the glass. You could pour pretty fast in the beginning, but once you get to the end, you need to be a little bit more cautious. So the charger is outboard. It's often it's larger than a fridge. Typically you'll see it in a fenced-in area. It's easy to identify where it is once you know what it is. And a tip is to use the Energy Bolt icon in the car map to locate Tesla branded charging, or an even better way is to navigate to the supercharger. So I'll focus on this last tip a little bit as well. Let's say that you are taking a road trip for the weekend. You're in Montauk and you're driving out. You want to go see Niagara Falls. You do not have to do any pre-planning whatsoever. You can if you want to, and we'll talk about something that helps you out with that. But once you get into your car, you want to leave with probably 80 to 100% of charges. It's going to make your trip a little bit easier in the beginning. But you would just press the right scroll wheel button in, say navigate to Niagara Falls, and your car is going to map out the entire trip for you. So as far as navigation, it's all mapped out for you, but it's also going to tell you what superchargers you need to go to. It's going to put a route that is planned based on where the superchargers are. It'll tell you how long you need to charge there for. So Tesla really, really figured that out. And this is the Tesla supercharger. John, if you want to talk about this.
Sure. We've all seen these. Excuse me, lose my voice. Version 2 is up to 150 kilowatts, or about 500 miles an hour peak, whereas the new ones, version 3, which happen to be made in Buffalo, are up to 250 kilowatts, or up to 1,000 miles an hour, like Stephen mentioned. So the reason they have the higher current is because it's dedicated per station, per pedestal, like you see on the left slide. In other words, version 2 supercharging meant you could potentially share adjacent stations, and you didn't want to park next to this, the person who's charging. You always want to stagger. Whereas the new ones, the version 3, each and every pedestal is its own. So it doesn't matter whether you're parked next to somebody else. No one knows how much these cost. You have to ask. It's one of those things. The cost, as we know, is transparent to us. It goes onto our Tesla account, whichever credit card is linked. But you're on average about 35 cents per kilowatt hour these days. The plug, again, it's the same Tesla plug, whether it's AC or DC. And you activate it just by the so-called plug and charge. There's nothing to do. There's nothing to activate. It is the most elegant system for fast charging. And you will find that out if you ever try to use another type of fast charging station. There are buttons, there are screens, and invariably a phone call to their 800 number. So if you have the chance to use a Tesla station, we highly recommend it. It is the most preferred and the fastest.
And as John was talking about too, there's the cost to use aspect that will vary in some parts of the state, and I think I've seen it in Long Island, and it might be some other where, maybe in the Hudson Valley too. But that kilowatt hour cost right there can actually become less or more. So if some of these supercharger stations offer off-peak supercharging, but that might mean it's like 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 2 a.m. There's a certain period where there's less stress on the grid. So they're able to offer the energy to you at a less expensive price. So that's something you would have to do a little bit more research on your own, but know that the average you're looking at is about 35 cents per kilowatt hour. And a Model S, a Model X battery, I believe, is 100 kilowatts. So you're looking at probably around $35 for a full charge, which is, if you're also comparing that to a Mercedes, an Audi, you need to get your premium gas for those. So you're also not even just thinking, okay, it's $35 for a tank of gas. Well, we already know it's way more than that now. But on those cars, you would even need premium gas. So it's substantially more. Just something to think about. If for some reason you're ever thinking about going back to an internal combustion engine, know the cost savings as well.
Yeah. And one other thing I wanted to add, on a version 3 station, the cable is thinner than on a level 2 or a version 2. In other words, it's a liquid cooled cable, and so it's a little easier to manipulate, especially if you're a frail person or maybe it's the winter time. It's better to charge a version 3 station because it's really the easiest to use. Now, real quick here, we don't have any of these in my neck of the woods, and I believe Tesla doesn't even make them anymore, but it's a so-called urban supercharger. It's not an urban legend. It's really called the urban supercharger. That's what they named it, and it's only a 72 kilowatt power capacity. So who knows how much they cost. It was free to use, but in some places they would vary it per minute over 2 different power tiers. Sometimes you were unsure of how much it would end up costing. Very similar to the other stations, same plug and charge, but you probably will never even encounter one of these.
And actually, John, would you mind taking this one as well?
No, I'd be happy to, because this is a source of confusion, even among some of our seasoned members. Now that these stations are starting to show up, the so-called DC fast charging, Dcfc stations, it's not going to be easy to charge your Tesla with these in most cases. This particular one is from EVgo, and it's in front of a Walmart. Very similar to the ones you'll see New York State installing along the Thruway or in other places. And there's also, this is an Electrify America station, the VW settlement for billions of dollars paid for these. So very simply, CCS is a worldwide standard that uses the plug in the upper right corner picture. It's unwieldy, it's big, but it's not even as big or heavy as the CHAdeMO adapter, which is an earlier standard. And some of those CHAdeMO plugs are still around, but those are also being phased out. So in other words, CCS is the prevailing champion and will power most EVs on the road besides Tesla. Tesla is the oddball. It has that elegant little connector. CCS has this kludge of a giant hybrid connector. So here's what you need to know. The cost will vary. The only way you can use the only way you can use a CCS station right now is if you have an imported adapter from Korea, I believe, which isn't even necessarily legit. Some of them are rumored to be scams. So you will not be charging your car on a CCS plug at this time. Let me repeat, you cannot charge any Tesla on CCS in the United States at this time directly. Europe is a different story. Europe has CCS compatibility, but in New York State, you will not be able to use your in-car adapter, the J1772, or any other adapter that's easily obtainable to charge on CCS yet. However, CHAdeMO does have an adapter. So if you are interested in finding one that's still for sale on eBay, you could pay up to $1,000 for it. It's supposed to be $450. There's a little bit of price gouging. We just did a demonstration with a CHAdeMO adapter the other day, and we do have one that we lend out through TOCNYS. It's only 50 kilowatt. That's basically a fifth of what a supercharger will deliver. So if you're in a pinch, maybe it'll work, but it seems like a big inconvenience and a big kludgy, heavy alternative to the supercharger. But we wanted to let everyone know. So sorry to go on and on, but it's kind of a relic. And if we could advise you to bypass that, I think you're going to be in better shape.
The truth is, it's funny. You think about some of like the fears of EV adoption, and I hate to say it, but like this is part of the fear of EV adoption, is that people think it's this very complicated thing, that it's, you just saw with the Tesla supercharger, it maps everything for you. You walk up to it, you take it out of the thing, it's not even locked in there, you take it out, you press the button, you plug it into your car, and you walk away. It's that simple. Where with these, you're thinking about, do I need this adapter? How do I work this machine? I haven't used this Electrify America one before, but I've used the one over there. It's this is probably one of the reasons why there's some hesitation for people to move to electric vehicles. So the more they know about the seamlessness of Tesla, the better.
Right, and Harry brings up a good point. The New York State system that still has a few CHAdeMO stations may even offer an adapter that's like, it's cabled on there with like a steel retention cable, an anti-theft cable. So you may be able to use it, and then you just simply plug it in, and that's great. But don't bank on being able to find one of these or find an adapter. I would still highly recommend you plan your charging around Tesla stations.
Right, so why range anxiety is all but extinct? And this is kind of what I was alluding to before with supercharging. Your battery is giant compared to many of the other brands of EVs. So when we're thinking about Teslas, you're looking at most of them today, I believe, Model 3, Model Y, you're looking at, if you have a long range, I think it's 77 kilowatts, 78, somewhere around there. Model S is 100, Model X is 100. So they're also very efficient. So the size, that's probably its own conversation, but the size of the battery also doesn't dictate how far your range will be. A lot of that depends on the efficiency of the motors, the mass of the vehicle, but it is good to know with Teslas that we have a good amount of range and a great charging infrastructure. So using the in-car navigation will also warn you if you need to charge, and it'll even tell you, if you're en route to somewhere, it'll say that you need to stop a little bit earlier. Maybe there's some headwinds that come on, maybe you have more people in the car and extra mass in the car. So it'll do all of the thinking for you. You can even start to learn your limits, maybe depending on your how long you've had the car, but you'll learn the limits, limitations of your vehicle and how that plays into your driving habits. So there's a couple exceptions. You may have to have a brutally long commute. Maybe you're in the Catskills and you drive down to New York City every day, away from any charging. So that is possible, but really there is supercharging everywhere in New York State. So it's mostly, you're never gonna have to worry about that. There's also the possibility of a perfect storm. You might have rain, steep climbs, heavy cargo. This is what I was talking about before. So just maybe with that, you're just doing a little bit more brain calculation before you go out on your trip. And also climate control if it's left on, though it should automatically cut out at 20% state of charge. This is if you're using something like camper mode or cabin overheat protection, dog mode. So that's its own category as well, its own probably webinar, but important to know about that. All right, and on to some of the do's and the don'ts. John, if you want to take the do's.
Yes, aim for ABC, always be charging. And as Stephen said, turn off the HVAC for best results when you're charging. It can make a difference, especially on level 1 and even level 2. Do charge to about 80%. It gives you the fastest charging interval and potentially best battery life. And you still get regen over about 90% state of charge. Your brakes will have to be used to stop. So be very careful. You may have experienced if your battery is at over 90% full, you can't slow down the car that fast. Why? Because there's no place to put the regenerated juice that you get by letting the motors become the brake. Do use apps like PlugShare, ChargeHub, and ChargePoint to locate and find extra info on charging stations, plus a better route planner. Someone in the chat asked, how do you sign up for EV Connect? Well, you go to evconnect.com and you find how to get the RFID card or load the app. So plugshare.com, chargehub.com, chargepoint.com, a better route planner.com. And then finally, do make sure that your battery is warm enough to charge in the winter. If you see a snowflake icon, it won't be easy or even possible to charge. We went over this in our winter driving tips, so I won't go into detail. But last year, I only lost about 7% efficiency. It was not that bad because I kept my Model 3 cabin in the low 60s to mid 60s and used the seat heaters. But your mileage may vary. You know, some people love to keep it like a sauna. In the winter, I keep it more like a slightly broken refrigerator. So that's it. I think that covers the do's and don'ts, and we're going to recap now.
Oh, so I think we just have the don'ts. Yeah, I'll be the negative one here.
Okay,
Right.
so the don'ts. I forgot.
So on to the don'ts. Don't charge the 100% unless you're taking a trip right away. And John mentioned, yeah, you'll lose the ability to have regenerative braking. It's not bad for the car. It's just that you're not going to get battery going back in. It's just that you're going to have to use your brakes, which will, I mean, who wants to use brakes in an electric vehicle? It's not fun. So don't run it down all the way down to a 0. The car tries to warn you before you need to get a flatbed to tow you. But you really, this is probably like the biggest fear of my sister. I tried for so long to get her to get a Tesla, and she always has this fear of like a flatbed needing to pick her up. This is something that really doesn't happen. It's actually, in my opinion, I used to have more range anxiety with a gas car than I've ever had with my Tesla. And I've taken some trips all around New York State. I've taken trips up to Acadia National Park. Harry's on here. I believe he took his Tesla up to Acadia National Park. That's up in Maine, like way out there in Maine. So yeah, it's such a better experience. It does all of that calculation for you as far as the charging and where you need to be, all of that. If you hear, as John phrased it, if you hear like a jet engine sound when you're charging, or thumps or bumps when you're supercharging, do not worry. The car is, it's alive. But it's those jet engine sounds are the fans kicking in to cool down the batteries. There's even there's a couple different pieces that actually are all about making sure that the battery is as safe as possible. Not that it's dangerous in a way, but that the battery life is safe. So that's probably some of the noises that you'll hear. And even more so in the winter, just because metal expands, contracts, and supercharging, a lot of energy, a lot of heat coming in, but it's not something you ever have to worry about. And then don't be overly concerned about the battery lifespan. The lowest end, this is if you probably beat on your car every second. If you're always charging to 100%, you're probably looking at maybe the lowest, like 250 to 300,000 miles of lifespan. If you're like everyone that's not me, then you're probably looking at closer to about 500,000 miles. And then for anyone, if you are on today's webinar and you haven't ordered a Tesla yet, most likely you're going to be getting the 4680s, right, John? That's what they're. So basically, in short, Tesla's making new batteries with a lifespan projected to be about 1 million miles. Right. And that's probably. Oh, go ahead, John.
No, I thought you were going to say that some of the newer batteries can charge to 100%.
And that's true.
The so-called iron phosphate. It's still a better idea because of the regen to keep it at 90% or below. But yeah, some people in the chat had already mentioned that. We're absolutely aware that's a great thing to note, that some of the newer batteries are different formulations, so they can go to 100. And yeah, you can charge in the rain. It doesn't matter.
Yes, that was actually a fear I had back in the day, as if you can charge while it's raining. I didn't know if you kind of was like that electricity, water, those don't mix. Am I going to die? We gave it a shot. Thankfully, I am still here. All right, so I'll go ahead and go over the recap. Most owners, you're going to charge at home or at work or at superchargers. And that is really, you're looking at that for long distance. You don't buy a Tesla and have to use a supercharger all the time. That's a really nice option for Tesla owners that exists, but it's not your primary method of charging. Level 2 domestic charging is the norm, right? You'll find these at shopping plazas, at the mall, at parks, like the one that John showed before. There was a charge, it wasn't a charge point charger. No, it was the charge point charger that was at the park. So you'll find these at really convenient places, and it's a huge added benefit to being an EV owner because you get free range for your car. Range anxiety should not occur if you use in-car navigation and keep between about 20 to 80% state of charge. And it's important to know that winter climates will impact efficiency, but usually it's not drastically. And if you want to know more about that on our YouTube channel, we do have, it's one of the more recent videos, but we have 2 episodes on winter prep. So we'll make sure we do that this coming year as well, but it's on the site on YouTube already. And always be charging if you can. All right, and with that, we have a few minutes. That took actually about an hour, so sorry that went a little bit longer, but we'll try to get through some questions as well. And John, if there's anything that you want to finish on this.
No, I think you handled it. Why don't we go through some of the Q&A real quick?
From Mitchell, is using the supercharger 90% of the time bad for the battery? I was lucky to have unlimited free charging from Tesla. I bought my 2019 Model S with 330-mile range, but shows that the full charge is up to 300 miles. Is degradation rate of my car normal? So if you're using the supercharger 90% of the time, it's going to have probably a little bit more of an impact than it would if you weren't. Given that it's a 2019, so you've had it for a few years, that range loss, if you don't have your Tesla yet, or you don't have an EV yet, typically the biggest degradation you're going to see is in the first 2 years, and after that it really evens out. So I would say if you can avoid using superchargers, as far as a daily means of charging, then do, but it's not something that's going to kill it terribly. I've lost range. All Tesla owners have lost a little range over those first 2 years, I'd say, but it's not something you really need to worry about too much. All right, we'll take a question from OCW.
Hi all. For cabin overheat, I just got my standard range Model 3 in February, so I do charge up to 100%. But I guess I'll listen to your advice and keep it at 90 to do the regen. But for cabin overheat, I get so much warnings, even though it's right in my driveway in the sun, but it's like 60 degrees outside, but it says 105, 110 degrees inside, and the climate activates, and I guess I'm wasting power. Should I just turn it off? Is it trying to save the battery or the interior, or what is it really doing?
John, do you want to answer that one, or do you want me to?
Well, I've never really had that because I park in a garage, but I would say it depends. It depends on how much juice you want to use up. If you keep your car plugged in while it's at home, then it will use your main power and your battery won't be affected when it kicks in. But obviously, you probably don't want to run an extension cord out to your driveway. So, Carrie, do you have any feedback on that? I don't know. Have you ever had that experience? Or has anyone else solved that? When you park in a garage, yeah, cabin overheat really doesn't become a thing.
For myself, cabin overheat really doesn't kick in if it's in the garage. You really don't need to use cabin overheat protection. I think that's probably part of the other question that you're asking, is like, is it really something I need to use? You really don't. The car is designed to be able to not have to use that, right? You were thinking, is my screen going to break? Is there going to be problems with the seats? Are they going to crack or something? It's an option. It's there. It's probably a good thing to have, but it's not something you need to use on the daily. So I think that might even answer the question a little bit more.
Okay,
and
thank you.
One more thing. Yeah, OCW, it was not even available at the beginning. That was a software update. So
Yeah.
overheat protection was never an option when I got the car. So it got up to, I think 152 degrees is my record.
Thank
Take
you.
one from the chat over here. Normally, how much percentage or miles do you lose a year of battery? I like to drive 15,000 miles a year. So for Mitchell, I specifically bought, when I was looking to buy a Tesla, I was like, used Model S, white, sunroof, 2017, or new Model 3. And I went with the new Model 3. Ultimately, the Model S probably would have been a little bit more, but I probably could have stretched the budget. But the Model 3 I have has I think it's 8-year, it's either 8-year or 10-year, 120,000 mile battery and drivetrain warranty. So even if battery degradation is a concern of yours, the battery and drivetrain warranty on our cars is substantial. So I know that doesn't answer the question that you have. It's really going to depend on a few different things. If you're supercharging daily, that might have a little bit more of an impact. If you in the wintertime, you're going to see degradation. It's not really degradation, but it's just showing you a little bit less range based on predicted variables. So it's really hard to answer that question. But the thing I would say is, don't worry about degradation long term, because the cars have a really good battery and drivetrain warranty. Question from, I believe I'm saying your name correctly. Is it Jujo? If you want to unmute.
Yeah, sorry about that. I just had a comment about one of the level 2 chargers at home. So I have National Grid that allows you to charge off peak. So it kind of helps with the cost of it all. I think it's from 11 p.m. and 7 a.m. And I've been setting it to charge around that time so that I could be off and fully charged. What's interesting too is I have a solar panel, so I get solar credit, but my solar credit happens on peak while it uses only my off peak for the Tesla. So that was an interesting experience as well, but I just wanted to comment on that.
Thank you. Question
We
from,
should do something on that. Just sorry to interrupt, but
oh,
we should do a special interest seminar on solar charging and time of use. If anyone thinks that would be interesting to them, please let us know. But more and more people, as they acquire solar, will probably run into that. So thank you for bringing that up, Drew.
okay, so I have a 2-car garage. I was considering a plug in the garage ceiling so the car can be parked in either space. Does it make sense to do? I know, actually, I don't know if Harry's still in here because he has a two-car garage, and his is, it's probably going to depend on just the length of, if you're using a mobile. So in this case, you'd probably be using the mobile connector. It's something you can do. I don't think you really don't have to worry about it falling from the ceiling. That shouldn't be a concern. The mobile connector does have a little bit of weight, but it's really fairly lightweight. I would say honestly, in all reality, I would leave that up to the electrician. I don't think it's a concern. It might be fine. And they could even maybe use some like zip ties to hold it to something on the ceiling. I don't know anyone that has ever done that before, but I think it's doable.
Yeah, always ask the electrician, because they're the ones who are responsible with getting the licensing and permit, if necessary. So I always defer, because your house is too valuable. Don't
Right.
risk.
Right.
Don't risk it, please.
And it actually looks like Chuck, so that worked out perfectly. Chuck, thanks for responding in the chat that you actually mounted yours to the ceiling. I got the ChargePoint HomeFlex with NEMA 650. Is it better to hardwire the unit or install a 650 plug? John, would you be able to answer that?
Yeah, generally, people are saying that hardwired is better. It's more secure, and it may be, as I said earlier, it might be up to code. Whereas if you have something that's 220 or 240 volts on a plug, that may not be legal in some places. But I'm not a lawyer or electrician, so you're on your own with that. But we'd be glad to help if if you run into other questions.
Had an experience with navigating to a Tesla Supercharger in Roscoe, New York. totally the boonies. Got to the charger with 3 miles left. Holy cow, you are a champion for that, by the way. You turned off the heat, the radio slowed down, and we made it. It was an excellent location, but a bit scary. Does this happen? We passed other chargers, but it was navigating to this particular charging station. Interesting. The lowest I ever got to a supercharger was actually about 3 miles. I'd like to know maybe when that was. My experience was, it was in the wintertime, which I always, we didn't mention this, and maybe it's probably in our winter prep course, but be a little bit more conservative in the wintertime when it comes to how much range you want to have, just because that's something you'll probably want to consider. Oh, it looks like Ruth, you're able to chime in here. Go ahead and unmute.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good. Actually, this was a couple of weeks ago. We made a trip to Connecticut, charged up there before we left. Even they sent me to a different charger, but I made a U-turn and went back and used the Supercharger in Connecticut. Then we went to Long Island and didn't charge, but this was 2 weeks ago, I think. And it was pretty scary. My husband was really sweating it.
I'll give a little bit of, and pretend you like never even heard this to everyone that's in here. Our cars technically have a little bit below zero. Yeah. So like it will get down to 0 and it'll drive like a turtle. I mean, you might get 35 miles, 40 miles, but it's going to be very, very limited as far as range. But there's been people that have done tests, in the name of science, and they've shown that the cars actually can go below 0 miles. I would not recommend doing that. And kind of like what Ruth was saying, you might, especially if you're new to owning the car. Ruth, how long have you had it?
Had it for it's a year. The end of March was 1 year. Yeah, and we were headed to Binghamton. I couldn't believe that it made us go all the way to Roscoe, which is on Route 17 between, sort of like the mountain way back to Binghamton.
Gotcha. Yeah, yeah. Oh, I was just going to say, I took a trip out to Buffalo this past weekend, and it wanted me, I knew I could have made it actually coming back. I could have made it to I live in Albany, I was in Buffalo, and I could have made it to the Utica Supercharger, but it forced me to go to the Syracuse one, even though I could have gone more. So it should try to predict for you the best case. You still made it, not giving a Tesla, you still made it. It did get you there.
I don't think I want to do that again. And there was nothing between, this Long Island, because we came up from Long Island. And there was nothing, there were some stops, but I think the charge was going to be maybe like 30 or probably 40% or something. And, they don't like to send you to the Supercharger if you have a good charge on. But I do hear that the Roscoe Diner is outstanding, but Netflix was even better.
Get the diner food and bring it in the car. There you go.
Yeah, I know. We thought about that.
The fact that we made it there was cherry on the cake.
That's right. Yeah.
Just to comment on that, I used to drive to Adirondacks all the time from Buffalo to Lake Placid, especially during the winter time. What Tesla doesn't really calculate is the up and down on the mountains where you're regenerating and using energy all the time. So it really doesn't reflect well how much range you have, especially if you're driving through the mountain range. I do use that energy icon to really look at my past 5 mile, 10 mile, 25 miles and expected, range based on that. So that kind of gives you a better estimate than the miles on next to the battery. But I tend to overcharge a lot, especially if I'm going through mountain areas.
Yeah, I think next time we'll do that, certainly.
Ruth, do you remember it showing you something too that said stay under 65 miles an hour to reach your destination? No, it didn't show you that?
No.
Okay, I'll bring that up right now too, just because it's typically would say that it would give you a warning, like if it knows you're going to be there, with very little range. But one of the biggest impacts on efficiency is speed. So if the speed limit is, let's say 65, maybe you typically hover around 73, 74, you might want to keep it at 65 or even a little bit less, drive safely, don't go under just to go under. But one of the biggest impacts on efficiency with a car is speed. So just a little extra tip right there.
Yeah, I did cut down. I think the speed limit there is 55 on that road. So I did go back to 65, to 55. And, you know, we turned off everything. So,
Yeah.
and when I could coast down the hill, I coasted down the hill. But I don't think I want to do that again,
No.
especially in the dark on Route 17. And there is nothing there except this diner and a gas station that was closed.
What about the voice in their discussion of the phone reception if you don't have it?
Oh, yeah. Someone said too, actually, Whoopi Goldberg talked about her Tesla on The View. And she talked about the possibility of getting down in the mileage and not having cell service. What do you do? You're stuck.
Yeah. So I guess the best thing to do is always give a little bit more range than you might think you need, especially, like I said, I've had mine for 3 years and I've kind of gotten to learn, especially in the winter time, I give it a little bit more and I still get home just with what I was expecting.
Yeah. Well, good to know. Thank you.
All right, always be charging. Always be charging when you can. I mean,
I know,
even if you're staying at we didn't mention it, but if you stay overnight, try to find a motel or hotel that has charging.
I do that. And the interesting thing is a lot of places will advertise that they have chargers there, which is nice, but not all of them have chargers. So you're kind of scrambling. And I have, when we stayed at a timeshare, I did bring an extension cord and they gave me permission to plug in, but you do have to have a heavier extension cord. You can't just use an in-house extension cord. You need that heavier, what is it, 16 gauge, 14 gauge?
It depends on the length, yeah. And you can even get extensions for the level 2. I have one in my trunk because when I lived in a condo and required, you know, just out of home charging, sometimes there would be a car blocking the generic station. So this is an extension cable for that J1772. So it was basically between my adapter and the station. I had an extra 15 or so feet, and I could charge basically wherever. So that's an option for some people.
Yeah, this situation was an outside outlet on the office of the town of the timeshare. So it wasn't even possible to hook up to a 1772.
Right. But generally the gauge is going to be pretty thick. Whether it's level 1 or level 2.
And I keep that in my car. Yeah. So
here's a question from the chat, which is, what do you do if you're going on a vacation for about 2 weeks? If you don't have for those with a charger at home and for those without a charger? It's a really great question. So if you have a charger at home, as John said before, always be charging. So I'd say maybe set it, you're going to be gone for 2 weeks, set it to 80% state of charge. Remember, you could even do that from your phone. So if you were like, oh no, I don't remember what I put at, just go on your Tesla app, I'd say get it to around 80%. If you don't have a charger at home, any means to charge at all, even including a wall outlet, charge it up before you go. You know, it might depend if is it outside, is it in a garage, or is there shade coverage? Are you leaving on cabin overheat protection? So I'd say especially if it's in a garage, and remember I said before, you don't really need cabin overheat protection, but I'd turn that off. And I would charge the car up to around 90% or as much as you can. And then that way it's not even a concern or a thought. Same goes for the winter time. Just leave it charged up as much as possible. I plug my charger in the rain. I take it that is safe to do with the charging. Yeah, you are completely safe with the rain or snow. It's not anything you will have to worry about. Carolyn? Oh, you're on mute.
Yes, I haven't really traveled, but I ran into a guy who was going to the West Coast and he was charging. And he said what he does is he doesn't do the navigation that Tesla says where to go. He just puts the destination of the next charger that he wants to go to on the road. So I was wondering if I did that, say in Binghamton, could I get a 80% or 90% charge at Binghamton and then proceed to the next charger I want to go to? Has anybody done that?
Yeah. Hi, Carolyn. I think that's a valid strategy, but the problem is, like we said, the sweet spot is in the middle of the battery. And if you are continually trying to top it off, even above like 70% or so, the charge rate is going to taper down. So you're going to end up spending more time than you need to. So I think it's a sort of a balance. You get to know this the more you use the car. But if you follow just the Tesla advice, it will do that sweet spot charging, and it will make more supercharger stops, but shorter individual stops, if that makes sense. Although if you really want to brute force it, you could stop at each and every charging opportunity and wait for it, depending on how much time you had. But there's really not much of an advantage these days. It's pretty exact with the superchargers, and the more that we get, the more accurate it will be. So it's personal choice, but I can't really see the rationale in spending more time than you need to, unless you're pulling a trailer or unless it's super cold out or something like that.
Oh, thank you. That makes sense. Thanks.
Question that's not about charging, but it's a cool question. What about the steer-by-wire system? I'm wanting that. Yes, steer-by-wire is very cool. I know Elon has actually said, I can't remember through what platform or how he said it, but Elon's like, I also want steer-by-wire. So nothing in the works. I wouldn't be completely surprised if the Cybertruck was steer-by-wire. It probably will be, given that it's a completely new platform. It's just Tesla prioritizes safety above all, which is extremely respectable. So unless they can prove without any shadow of a doubt that steer-by-wire is going to be just as safe, if not safer, they won't do that. But I would not be surprised if Cybertruck becomes steer-by-wire. This is a pretty complicated question. I don't know if I'll be able to answer this one, but by the time 500,000 miles, like you reach that, will the battery degradation be less than 50%? John, what do you think?
That's a lot of driving.
It's a lot of driving.
I don't know if your seats or the steel panels in your car will be around at 50,000. I don't know. I don't know what the answer is, but I can say that cars that have been used as taxis, Tesla, what's it called? Stephen, do you remember the name in California?
Tesla Loop?
There was a Tesloop. That's it. Thank you.
Okay.
Tesloop. If you look up TESLOOP on Google, they may have some more accurate information because they've maxed out the mileage by doing daily drives back and forth between, I think, California and Vegas. So 50,000 miles is a lot, and a million miles, I calculated at the average rate that drivers drive, that would be like 90 years of driving for a million miles. So I would just enjoy the car. You're probably going to want to get a new one with fresh paint before you're going to want to get a new battery.
See, I think there's just a few more questions. This, I guess, is a question here. Any advice when leaving the car for a week or two at a parking garage with no chargers? We left it for a week with no issues, but had a full charge to begin with. I think pretty much we're at the same thing as before. The question, this might have come, this was more recent. Yeah, just if you can leave it. I think you said right, if there is no charger, yeah, try to get to your destination. Let's say it's an airport, right? Try to get there with as much charge as possible. That would be a good recommendation. So just get there with as much charge as possible. Is there a way?
There's, let me interrupt. There's a channel on YouTube, Tesla Joy. Remember we had her on during COVID, TESLAJOY, and she will talk about how much she lost over a trip to Taiwan, which I believe was 3 weeks in California. So she parked in relatively moderate temperatures, but I think you'll be surprised.
Oh, and one more piece to add to that too, just so you know, just a little bit of a tip. And if you remember it, good. If you are, let's say you're away for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month, you're better off not checking the app to see, let's say you're like, I need to see how much range I have. Whether you check it or you don't check it, what's going to happen is going to happen. But if you do check it, it's actually waking up the car, which is going to use more battery. So, it's not going to add more if you look at it. It's still going to be what it is. So I would recommend that just let it be what it is. Don't go to the app to check how much more range is on there, because it will wake it up and that is going to use some more energy. It'll go into kind of a sleep mode of sorts. Right. I think we have another question from OCW.
Hi, could I ask a non-charging question? I'm new to the Tesla from this year.
Go ahead. Yeah.
I drove my family from Long Island to Great Adventure, and I use the autopilot a lot on I-95. I've driven a Volvo also, which has the stay in the center kind of drive on the highway. It deactivated on me like halfway through the trip because it got mad at me because it said I didn't have my hand on it enough. It's been deactivated for the whole drive. Well, part of the reason was it didn't even warn me because it just flashes blue on the screen, but I'm focusing on the road. I never even saw it flashing blue. Is there an audio
It
thing that I
should
can turn on?
it should have been going beep 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 beep. As the closer it gets to kicking you out, it should
Right.
beep faster and faster. Did you have?
Okay,
I mean,
so-
even with the
so-
music on, you still should have heard it though. I don't know.
Yeah, okay, so maybe I missed it. So you're saying there is audio because it
Oh,
was
yeah.
just the blue,
Yeah.
and I wasn't staring at the screen, so I didn't see the blue, going off.
Yeah.
And then it says no more stay in lane and no more autopilot and like no soup for you.
I will
Well,
say too,
yeah.
I've had that happen before. Only I won't give the reason why. I may have been really tired, but I ended up getting kicked out of autopilot. Autopilot is not an excuse to drive sleepy,
Right.
or inebriated, either of those. But
When it flashes, when it flashes blue, sometimes I may miss that too, but I've been like resting my arm on the wheel just enough to give it slight pressure, and it
Right.
doesn't seem to bug out. Or also use your thumb on the left scroll wheel for volume, just one little tick up or
Mhm.
Oh,
down.
really? So the
Yeah.
volume can do it?
Yeah, the volume is almost as good as torquing the wheel. There are some instances when the volume will not be accepted, like you do have to move the wheel. But in general, if you just get the tendency to move that volume up and down, you'll be great.
That's my go-to, John, is the volume.
Oh.
And then one more piece, just in case you don't know it, because it says autopilot will not be available till next drive, which makes
Right.
you think, I have to wait till the next time I drive. What that actually means is, and I think it's okay that I share this, it is what it is, but if you just pull off to the side, put the car in park, put it back in drive, it'll kind of kick everything back to how it needs to be. So just good information to have. So if for some reason that happens, you're like, oh man, I have another 3 hours on this drive, I need autopilot. Pull off somewhere where it's safe to do it, put it in park, put it back in drive, and you should be good to go again.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. I don't see any more questions in the chat. If no one else has any questions. Oh, all right, Mitchell, we have one more question.
Comment. I bought this ankle weight from Amazon. It's a 1 pound, and I just wrap it on my steering wheel.
We don't talk
I'll
about
let
that,
it
Mitchell.
drive
All right.
straight up.
Okay,
It
we
does
won't
such
talk.
No, we can't endorse anything like that,
Yes.
unfortunately.
Yeah.
And it definitely works, like what you're saying, that does work. But the other reason I would say too is if you're tired, let's say like, I'm guessing you probably used it for like a long trip or something like that when you used it.
Yep.
Yeah. So if the thing is, you at some point you become so disconnected because you feel like a passenger at that point. You're like, oh, the car is driving for me. I kick back, I relax. Now, if you really start to doze off, by really paying attention to the road, if a deer comes out, if the car in front of you stops short, whatever it might be, that could be the difference between life and death. So it's like, yeah, what you're saying, it does work, but it's like the value of your life is so much more. So I would say, John and I, the club, we do not endorse using anything like that whatsoever. But just for everyone, for your safety, I have to say too, and for everyone, like, don't use that just for your own safety. Yeah.
Yeah,
In
just use your
turn-
arm, like I said, if you just lean your hand on there, it's better.
But in terms of safety, the blind side, is there any other way to make it better? Or there is no blind side really because of Tesla, like most of the other vehicles, when I'm looking to the left and the right, it's just the camera, or is there anything else I can do that you guys have tips for?
Yeah, I think in the newest update, I personally don't use it, but in the newest update, when you put your turn signal on, there's a way for it to have the camera pop up.
It pops up in the bottom left, which is the hardest part to see because your hand's there if you're driving the proper way when they teach you in driver's education, when you hold it on the bottom. But okay.
The other option too is rather than you could have that if you want, but when I first got my car, I would always drive around with the rear view camera on, and now you can have the rear view. If you press that rear view camera and then you swipe up, it actually shows you the side repeater cameras as well, and that's in the middle of the screen. But then you just won't have your map. Yep. Yeah. So that's what. Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah. And then also if you have navigate on autopilot, if you have FSD, always check to see, no matter what, always check to see. But just it'll switch the lanes for you, which is really nice to have. I don't think we have any more questions. If for some reason I didn't mention this in the beginning, I should have mentioned it in the beginning. But if you're not a member, go ahead and make sure to sign up on the club. Just go to our website and you'll see a register thing, or the link itself is tocnys.org/register. It's free to sign up. We do have paid levels as well. So if you're a paid member, thank you for contributing to the club. We definitely appreciate your generosity. And I think with that, John, thank you for co-hosting this with me. It was a pleasure to do this. And
I'm glad we had this. And if anyone has any other questions or topics for future talks, this is your club. So please let us know, and we're more than happy to schedule one.
All right. And with that, thank you for joining today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. And
Thank you.
We'll see you all very soon. Have a
Thank
good
you.
one. Bye.